I want everyone to know this information because what we don't want to happen is that on the other side of this election in November, we find out that 10 million migrants voted and not correctly and not accurately, but there is zero way to extract those votes. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Crashes and Taxes. I am so excited to be with you this week. I've been traveling quite a bit and will be for the next several months. And so it's been kind of chaotic, but this is a really different kind of podcast. I'm going to go ahead and give you a warning up front. This is going to be a podcast that covers a political topic. I have no interest in making any kind of political statements or statements about my personal leanings or anything like that. I am, as a lawyer, bringing this topic to you so that you can understand what is happening in our country and some of the things that are concerning with the 2024 election, even now in May, some 6 months in advance, or a little less than 6 months in advance now since the election's at the beginning of November. And then I will transition to another topic so that you can, again, I have been stating since the very beginning of 2024 that this will be a year of disruption, and it will be a year of disruption because of this election. So I want to go ahead and show you some concerning things that we as an American public need to bring into the forefront of all Americans, because this is so egregious that our country could potentially go in this direction, that if we bring this to the forefront of Americans, then this can't be obfuscated and hidden and only brought out and revealed to the American public after the fact, when I can promise you judicially it will be way too late. So this is a little bit of an unusual topic, but we do talk about at Crashes and Taxes politics, because politics informs policy, and policy is tax policy, which we care a lot about. And tax policy also impacts economic policy, and economic policy absolutely impacts the markets. If you're not somebody that wants to hear from a lawyer that practices in the financial and economic space as their professional discipline regarding this kind of information, then I would encourage you to turn off this podcast now. And for the rest of you that do want to know the information that is going to potentially impact the country, then I suggest that you continue on and that we continue. So as a lawyer, it's very beneficial for me to see these things. I look at, I can't even actually tell you the amount of data I look at on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, certainly on a monthly and quarterly basis, annual basis. There's so much data that I'm constantly reviewing to make sure that we are bringing forward all of the data points as much as humanly possible outside of a quantum computing type of situation that will allow us to shape our beliefs of what's going to happen in the market economically with taxes and policy, because that is what impacts our clients' ability to have control over their wealth, their finances, and their net financial asset position, which is what we care about. So let's go ahead and get started with this very, very unique topic that I'm really excited to cover today. I'm going to have to make this bigger so I can actually read my own slide. So let's just do this for just a quick moment. And I want to point out to you this beginning of this code that we are going to be talking about today. And again, I am a lawyer, so I'll be able to explain this to you as much as and layman's terms as much as possible. So this is 18 USC 611, and it's entitled Voting by Aliens. And I'm going to read this to you here. It's A, it shall be unlawful for any alien to vote in any election held solely or in part for the purposes of electing a candidate for the office of president, vice president, presidential elector, because remember, the states people don't actually basically elect the president. We have an electoral college, which means that you are voting to hire electors to represent your chosen candidate. So it has to obviously specify here in section A of this 18 US USC 611, subsection A, it has to specify that if you're electing a presidential elector, that's because we are not a direct vote, and that is why that is specified. Member of the Senate, member of the House of Representatives, delegate from the District of Columbia, or resident commissioner, unless, so let's just recap what we've got so far. 18 USC 611 subsection A basically says it is unlawful for any alien. Alien is defined in another part of the code, but basically a non-citizen, okay? And non-citizen, it is unlawful for them to vote in any basically federal election that is electing the president, the vice president, presidential elector to then elect the president or vice president, member of the Senate, member of the House, delegate from the DC district, or a resident commissioner. It's unlawful unless, and then you've got 3 exceptions, unless the election is held partly for some other purpose. Unless, example, carve out 2, aliens are authorized to vote for such other purpose under a state constitution or statute or a local ordinance, and meaning it is a union legally, voting for other such purposes is conducted independently of voting for a candidate for such federal office in such a manner that an alien has an opportunity to vote for such other purpose, but not an opportunity to vote for a candidate for any one or more of such federal offices. So those are the 3 exceptions. Then subpart B states, any person who violates this section shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. So you can have a fine or you can be imprisoned for a year. So we know that you can't vote if you're an alien in a federal election unless one of the 3 exceptions apply. Then it says in subsection C, subsection A does not apply to an alien if, and I'm going to look now here to the 3rd item. So we're now in 18 USC 611 C3. And I really did again. Subsection A does not apply to an alien if the alien reasonably believed at the time of voting in violation of 18 USC 611 subsection C3. The alien reasonably believed at the time of voting in violation of such subsection A that he or she was a citizen of the United States. So what we're talking about here is that if an alien reasonably believes they are a citizen entitled to the right to vote, that therefore means that A does not apply, and therefore it is not unlawful, because A is the subsection that says it shall be unlawful. And then subsection C is a carve out or an exception to A that says if the alien, as defined in this, again, it's going to be predefined in another statute, if an alien reasonably believes at the time of voting in violation of the subsection A that he or she was a citizen of the United States. So I want you to understand that this is the current federal law in effect that affects our federal elections and is specifically dealing with non-citizens and their ability to vote and how the federal law would look at that vote. So this is just a very important understanding baseline for the information that we are now about to go through. So let's go ahead and continue on. Now what you can see here is this is an article in the Federalist that came out on May the 7th, and it says, South Carolina agency, this is from an agency of South Carolina that implements Medicaid. Now, Medicaid is a federally funded program that is administered at the state level. So basically, states get what we call block grants to fund their Medicaid, which is a healthcare program for the indigent and, the rather lower economic, socioeconomic classes. And so it is federally funded, but state administered. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a Medicaid situation. And here we see the Federalist article from May the 7th of this month that says, South Carolina agency, the feds force us to give voter registration to foreign nationals. Now I'm going to go ahead and read this to you. South Carolina law enforcement is investigating allegations that a state agency is handling voter registration forms to foreign nationals. An agency official tells the Federalist, and they are saying that the federal law has tied the state's hands. Jeff, and I will not try to pronounce his last name, a spokesperson for the State Department of Health and Human Services says the department, as the state's Medicaid agency, is mandated to provide voter registration information under Section 7 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. The information apparently goes to everyone applying for benefits, including foreign nationals, i.e., aliens. Section 7 requires each state to designate voter registration agencies, including all state offices providing public assistance, unemployment compensation, or disability services, state and local offices, federal and non-government offices, and armed forces recruitment officers. So basically what this is saying is this Section 7 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 requires that the state designate voter registration agencies, and those are and include all state offices providing public assistance. So what we have here is that a rule that the federal government is saying state agencies that are providing public assistance must provide voter registration. And you can see here, this is a tweet from Emerald Robinson where she says, why is the South Carolina Medicaid office insisting on giving voter registration forms to non-citizens? And so then the conversation is going from there. So what we have is a federal law, 18 USC 621, that basically says it's illegal to vote if you're an alien unless you believe you are a citizen. Then we have the what the administration now is calling newcomers, but let's just call them aliens as the 18 USC called it. These aliens are coming through. They're going to states. They're getting farmed out to the various states that they're being moved to. They're going to apply for Medicaid at the states. And because of the National Voter Registration Act, those agencies that are state-run but federally funded for public aid like Medicaid are being required to give these people voter registration paperwork. Now, remember, if the alien has a reasonable belief that they were a citizen, then it is not a crime for them to vote. So let's keep going. Now what we see here is the actual National Voter Registration Act of 1993. I'm just going to read this to you. These questions and answers are designated to provide or designed to provide information and guidance to state and local officials, as well as the general public concerning the provisions of the NVRA and its interaction with other statutes enforced by the department. The department welcomes comments concerning this document. Now we have this overview. What is the NVRA? The National Voter Registration Act of 1993, also known as the NVRA or Motor Voter Law, sets forth certain voter registration requirements with respect to elections for federal offices. Section 5 of the NVRA requires that states offer voter registration opportunities at state motor vehicle agencies. Section 6 of the NVRA requires that states offer voter registration opportunities by mail-in application. Section 7 of the NVRA requires that states offer voter registration opportunities at certain state and local offices, including public assistance and disability offices. So there you go. Section 7 of the NVRA of 1993 requires state publicly funded aid offices to provide voter registration information to people that are registering for benefits, even if they are non-citizens. Let's continue. Then you have something like this happening. You have non-citizen voting in DC. This is a Board of Elections notification, a public service announcement from the DC Board of Elections, District of Columbia. Non-U.S. citizens, residents of the District of Columbia can vote in local elections under the Local Resident Voting Rights Amendment Act of 2022. Non-U.S. citizens, residents can vote in district elections for the offices of mayor, attorney general, chairman, member of the D.C. Council, member of the State Board of Elections, National Advisory Neighborhood Commissions. Non-U.S. citizen residents cannot vote for federal offices. So you've got two situations here where you have aliens coming through our country, moving into different states, applying for federal benefits, being given federal Medicaid benefits, and then being given voter registration paperwork as part of that sign-up process. Then you have all kinds of local districts basically stating to them that they are allowed to participate in the election at the local level. Not the federal level, but the local level. So what you have forming is a reasonable basis for every alien in this country to believe that they actually have a right to vote in a federal election as a citizen. Because why? Because when they went to get their benefits provided through a state agency federally funded like Medicaid, they are being provided voter registration forms to sign up to vote. And a what we call the reasonable person standard in the law, that would be a reasonable basis for that person to believe that they are becoming a citizen and will in fact have the right to vote. Then they're getting advertised through various local election boards like this DC one that I've given you as an example, that they are actually entitled to vote. Now they're required to put in there they're not allowed to vote in federal elections, but that's the very last sentence. How many people are going to read that? It will not take any lawyer worth any kind of merit to argue that just the act of receiving voter registration paperwork through the official process of applying for government-funded, federally funded aid like Medicaid is a reasonable basis to believe that they are becoming a citizen and that they are entitled to vote. Therefore, making the act of voting in and of itself not a crime, not illegal, as it is explicitly exempted out. Let's continue. What we have here is a Biden interview with a Hispanic radio station on May the 7th. And on May the 7th, you can see this is a Fox News article published May the 9th, and it says Biden roasted for the Freudian slip of referring to immigration influx of Hispanic voters. President Biden appeared to accidentally refer to Hispanic migrants as voters during an interview on a Spanish-speaking radio show released this past Tuesday, which again was Tuesday, May the 7th. It's even a bigger influx now in terms of Hispanic voters or Hispanic citizens who want to become citizens, President Biden said of the migrant crisis, of the current migrant crisis. He argued that the current wave of immigration is a little bit like back in the 1840s and the great exodus of Ireland because of the famine and the way the Irish Catholics were treated. They said, no, we don't need any more of these folks. So let me read the quote again from Biden on a Hispanic radio station. It's even a bigger influx now in terms of Hispanic voters or Hispanic citizens who want to become citizens, end quote. So you have Biden also giving you a little bit of the inside of his mind that potentially these are going to be voters. So if you're wondering why maybe the demographic shift of our citizens in this country from maybe one party to another over these last 4 years is not being addressed or doesn't seem to really be an issue that matters to this administration, you're starting to see a framework here of a lot of people that are coming in that will have an absolutely sound legal argument to state that they have a reasonable basis to believe they had a right to vote in the presidential election in 2024. And so I want everyone to know this information, because what we don't want to happen is that on the other side of this election in November, we find out that 10 million migrants voted and not correctly and not accurately, but there is zero way to extract those votes because people do not put their name on their vote. It is by design when you go to vote, confidential who you're voting for. It is designed to be that way. So there's no intimidation of who your candidate of choice is. And that obviously has to be the way it is. So if we are not knowing who voted which way, and you then find out after the fact that 10, 11 or more million people believed they were citizens and had the right to vote, and in fact had all kinds of signs coming through the border process to go and vote, and they have certain candidates on those voting signs, go vote, and you've seen lots of interviews with these people being interviewed talking about, they've been instructed to vote. So I'm not going to speculate. I'm just going to tell you this is the legal framework in which this kind of thing can happen. And what we heard in 2020, whether you agree or disagree how that election went down, that's not the point. What we heard judicially in all of the court cases that were brought out after 2020, what we heard was, well, we can't separate these votes after the fact. And so we need to let sleeping dogs lie. In other words, we can't undo this election. We have no idea which of these illegal votes were for who. So we have to just let it go and we can do some audits, but that's it. But if you have people voting that believe they have the legal right to vote, even if you determine after there's 11 million people that voted that way that did not have that right, how in the world would you extract those votes? Because you have no idea who they voted for. There's no identifier on those votes as to who actually cast that ballot, and you would never be able to extract those votes. So prior to this happening and prior to the judicial court saying there's nothing we can do, our hands are tied, we as American citizens need to say, no, we are not going to stand by and watch 10 or 11 million people that have come here in the last however many years be coerced or be hoodwinked into thinking they have the legal right to vote. And because they have a reasonable basis to believe that based on everything I've laid out here for you, it's not even a crime. This is a massive problem. Now, I want to finish up this podcast with going very quickly to the final point that I have that is related to, again, it's outside now. We're moving past the legal framework of the argument and setting up how this could possibly happen for 2024. But I do want to talk to you about this. And this is something that came out on May the 7th. You can see here, this is the Daily Mail, and this is the FDA, the head of the FDA, who is testifying to Congress here on beginning of May, and he says that the FDA says it's preparing for a bird flu pandemic in people that could kill 1 in 4 Americans. So if you're a fan of Crashes and Taxes and you follow this podcast religiously, you know that I have definitely talked about the fact that we are likely to get an additional pandemic this year prior to the election that will put us back into a lockdown situation. So this is just the Daily Mail reporting that at the beginning of this month. And this is all like social and psychological conditioning, because as they get prepared to bring something forward, they start to pepper it into the news. And then it will actually become just like COVID did, like just instantly like that. I remember hearing about it. I was at a DC conference at the very beginning of March of 2020. And by the time I got back from the conference at the end of the first week of March, I got an email from the conference saying there was someone that was at the conference tested positive. You need to go ahead and start testing. And then within literally 10 days, we were locked down as a country completely just like that. It can happen that fast. So we're starting to get these percolations of the FDA testifying before Congress that they are preparing for another pandemic. And then I just want to bring to you to today, which is today's headlines. You can see USA Today. The CDC confirms a second human infected with bird flu from U.S. dairy cows. You can see Forbes. Bird flu explained. U.S. reports another human case of bird flu apparently being translated through dairy milk. I don't have time to go into that today, but you can see this NBC News, second human case of bird flu linked to dairy cows found in Michigan. So I'm going to tell you again that we are going to experience an additional pandemic this year. Looks like it's going to turn out to be bird flu. It's interesting because I had always seen, based on all the information that comes to me, that it was going to be some kind of hemorrhagic fever where you would see, and it is very, unfortunately, it is very disturbing because when you see these pictures, you will see that people are actually bleeding from their eyes. And so this is a very, this is much beyond, if coronavirus was a test case, this is going to be the real deal, and it is going to scare a lot of people. So I just want you to prepare now. A lot of people take ivermectin prophylactically, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to give you any kind of medical advice. I'm here to tell you that everything I told you at the beginning of this year, potentially escalation to World War III, potential cyber attacks or EMP or solar flares that NASA's been peppering us with psychologically for the last 18 months. We're going to have some kind of electrical grid disruption. We're going to have another pandemic. And now with the election, I just want to show you the legal framework that could allow, tens of millions of non-citizens to vote in this election. Whereas if that happens, it would be nothing that could be rectified after the election outside of holding the election again. So it's a lot of information to take in, you guys, and we give this information to you so that you can really prepare for yourself and your family for what is likely going to turn into be a very, very rocky year. I would say it's beginning now and it's going to continue. So that's kind of where we are. I didn't have any time to really do economic news. There's so much economic news out of China with the yuan, gold, silver, obviously, the Japanese yen and the ratio of yen to dollar is massively problematic. And China is dumping treasuries in order to deal with their yuan problem. So we do have a lot of economic news, but I just wanted to get this framework out to you guys so that you could start to really understand. And I would suggest that if you're interested in these kinds of topics, that you really push this podcast out to friends, family, a lot of people that can understand kind of the setup that is legally happening here with everything that has happened in these last couple of years with a lot of people coming through our borders. So that's it for this week, you guys. I hope everyone's having a great May. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye. Hey.